In 11th century in Karnataka, there is a stone inscription. In this stone inscription, a lady is sitting on a chair and reading a manuscript in her left hand. By her right, on a small stool, a pile of manuscripts are lying. That is the picture, that is the image carved on the stone. And what is written beneath is even more interesting. It is written that her name is Saminirmidi. Her parents' names are also given. And she is described as Sarvashastra Prasiddhe, meaning one who was famous for all Shastras. Panini has special names for women teachers.
Namaste to all the viewers that have joined us this evening. Sangam Talks welcomes you. Today we talk about Arya, an anthology of Vedic women, which is a book that has been published by Indic Academy and curated by our speaker today, Shiv Kumar GVG. It consists of 10 stories written by 10 authors about 10 women from the Vedas and the Itihas Puran. It is a retelling and creative reimagination within the boundaries of our tradition. It is a celebration with conviction of the glorious role played by the women of Vedic society and culture in shaping Bharatvarsh and a fresh discourse. Our speaker today is an IT professional hailing from NIT Surat and IIT Bombay. He is a part of the Indic fraternity as scholar in residence and contributes to Indica today as a consulting editor, where he has written on Mahabharat extensively. He has a special interest in Rigved, Bharatiya Itihas Puran, and civilizational conflicts. Sir, I warmly welcome you and request you to take over from here.
Thank you so much. Namaste, everybody. I'm here in front of you to present our book, Arya, an anthology of Vedic women. It's a collection of 10 short stories from 10 women of Vedic culture, written by 10 different authors, curated by me and published by Indic Academy. So without much delay, let's move into the presentation itself. So what does the book consist of? As I said, the book consists of 10 different stories. The stories are Chitrangada, Damayanti, Shakuntala, Subhadra, Madhavi, Ulupi, Satyavati, Gargi, Maitreyi, and Shandilya Dohita. It's written by Rohini Gupta, Manjula Tekal, Prasad Kulkarni, Bharati V, Madhurima, Rajani, Deepak, Celia Pillai, Kavita, and Ranjit Radhakrishnan. 8 of these characters are from Mahabharata, and that is quite incidental because when we announced the anthology, it was in the month of October 2020, and we sought, accounts from the Vedas, Itihasa, Puranas, and Upanishads. That was the spectrum which we invited. Of course, many of these accounts are in multiple texts, but Mahabharata being the civilizational text, that is a significant anchor, and we get stories from Mahabharata a lot. And 2 of them are from Upanishads, Gargi and Maitreyi. Many of these accounts are somewhat known, I would say. Everybody knows Damayanti, everybody knows Shakuntala, but then the book has a lot of narratives and perspectives that are somewhat not known. That is primarily because in the Itihasa Puranas, you don't find everything about one person in one place. And often we know about these persons from derived accounts and not so much from the most original accounts. And that is the reason why, the stories presented in Arya will be significantly different So this is the summary of the book. Without much ado, let's go into some of these stories. Obviously, to our readers, we do not want to reveal everything about the story, but then we will talk about the story minimally so that there is a glimpse and a peek into the story. Chitrangada, as we all know, is the daughter of king of Manipur who marries Arjuna. But then there is a warrior dimension to Chitrangada, which is not very well known. In fact, Rabindranath Tagore has written a very interesting poem on Chitrangada, which I think is quite well known in the Bengali literature circles, but not so very well known outside. Fundamentally, she is very keen on protecting her ancestral kingdom, and that is the personality that we have brought out in the book. Damayanti, all of us know the story of Nala and Damayanti, and it comes in the Vanaparva of Mahabharata when Yudhishthira is down, and for him to realize who else has undergone similar difficulties, Nala and Damayanti's story is told. But what is very interesting is that in that story, it's not so much that Nala is the hero, it is Damayanti who is the hero of that story. It is Damayanti who goes through enormous difficulty, somewhat more difficulties than Nala, and it is her wisdom, her courage, her conviction, and her love that takes her through the entire complex situation. It is she who has chosen Nala, and it is she who eventually uses all her wisdom to find Nala. Thus, in this story, it is Damayanti who is the hero, and it is her strong personality that comes through in the story. Shakuntala, all of us know the Abhignana Shakuntalam account written by Kalidasa, where her personality is significantly different from the Mahabharata account, where she is a very strong lady. She does extraordinary things in the Sabha in front of Dushyanta, and she brings up Sarvadamana, who becomes Bharata and finally becomes the emperor of the Kuru kingdom, the Puru Bharata kingdom. And it is he, according to one tradition, who shapes the culture of this land. So Shakuntala is that brave woman and that phenomenal mother who shapes King Bharata. Subhadra, we all kind of think of her as playing minimal role by the sides. Even during the Kurukshetra war, she's kind of in Dwaraka. But then we forget that when Sri Krishna dies and when Pandavas head towards Himalayas, finally it is Subhadra who stays back and takes care of Parikshit. Of course, he is a grown-up man now, but it is the wisdom of Subhadra that carries through Parikshit. Madhavi is another story where it is much less known, but known for all the wrong reasons. And it is one of those heavily distorted accounts in Mahabharata. And I don't want to go into who all have distorted it. But if people know Hindi literature, they know that it's a heavily distorted account. And here we present the traditional perspective and how phenomenal a lady she is in the original account, and what is her persona. And what is the traditional perspective of her story? It is the perspective and the philosophy that is equally important, apart from Madhavi herself. Satyavati, we all know, the kind of role that she plays during the challenging times of the Kuru kingdom. But it is important to know that it is she who actually virtually rules the Kuru kingdom in the absence of Shantanu, because Bhishma is quite reluctant. And it is she who navigates through all treacherous situations and takes very important decisions. An iron-willed lady. Ulupi, wife of Arjuna, seems to stay by the side, but actually, very quietly, she shapes a lot of things at the center. Graciously, she conducts herself, but she never loses the sight of what's happening in the center, even as she is, staying by the side. And quietly, she does many things. Gargi and Maitreyi are some of the most celebrated accounts of the Upanishads. The philosophers, the sages, the Brahmavadinis, and these accounts are quite well elaborated, but at the same time, significantly problematized by modern accounts. And here we present traditional perspective. Gargi in particular is quite well better presented, whereas Maitreyi's role is not sufficiently emphasized. And here we present the roles of Gargi and Maitreyi in relation to everything else that is happening in those accounts, in those stories. The last story is very interesting, Shandilya Dvaita. It is presented as a poem, and it is one of those stories that just comes and goes in 3 pages in Mahabharata. And if you are not carefully reading, you'll even miss it. But it's a very strong account. She does something extraordinary. She seeks an improbable marriage, and it is her penance that takes her husband also into the heavens. So the purpose of presenting these accounts is to showcase how the tradition has viewed women. That is on one side. On the other, if women were not shaping the civilization in this form, these characters would not have appeared in our accounts. For us, with the Shraddha, these are real people who have been there in the past. And for others, they still have to deal with the fact that the tradition carved these personalities in this beauty and in this sophistication and in this high culture. Interestingly, not one woman in the traditional account originally comes across as subdued or docile or without power or any such thing. Every single woman who comes across as a fascinating woman with her own mind, who is all the while shaping life and the civilization. So in many ways, Bharatavarsha is that civilization that has been shaped by women such as these. It is to celebrate these women and our culture that we chose to write this book. So some more insights into what we were up to while writing this book. As I said, in the month October 2020, I made this proposal to Indic Academy, and Harikiran Garu immediately accepted it. Our objective was to bring all accounts starting from the Vedic times up until modern times. Of course, this is the first such book, and we propose to write a series, and this ought to be a kind of a civilizational movement. It cannot be done by a single person at all. And this is the first step that we are taking towards that. Why did we choose the word Arya? We were looking for a term that represents our women who were brave, courageous, learned, of high culture, of sophistication, of women who have shaped the civilization. And we found that The word Arya is that word that has an equivalent in all languages in India and is also ancient. By ancient, what we mean is the word Arya is found in the Rig Veda itself. And in the Rig Veda, Arya is a self-reference to the by the Purubharata kings to themselves, or the clans to themselves, as people of high culture, of sophistication, of civilization, of nobility. So in the gradually it gained the connotation of being noble and of high culture, and spread across the region of Bharatavarsha. And ancient Bharatavarsha is much bigger than the modern India. So, this term spread across the west of India and as well as the east of India. So you'll find it in some way, some equivalent, some Prakrita version, some Tadbhava version in every Indian language and even outside of India. So because of this, its antiquity and its contemporary usage as well. If there is one word that has been used continuously with expanded meaning without being compressed, it is the word Arya. And of course, it is in the 20th and 21st century, there has been a significant attempt to distort it. And that's another reason why we must have this word. We thought it was the most apt word. So as I said, the book presents women in this first book is about women of Vedic culture. At the same time, we are highly faithful to the original accounts, and this needs elaboration. Often the stories are sketchy in the sense that the characters are presented with some detail. So obviously there is a lot of creative reimagination to present these accounts in modern form, in a short story form of around 20 to 25 pages. But nowhere does it cross the boundary marked by the tradition. None of the traditional references are violated to create a distorted narrative. Within that boundary, there is a significant of detailing in order to make it a complete short story of the modern form. At the same time, collectively, we sought that this be a civilizational narrative of our nation and present the Bharatiya perspective in everything, including how women thought of themselves in this civilization. This is not something that somebody else has imposed. This is how women thought of themselves, and this is how women appear in our accounts. And this is in many ways the womanhood of Bharatavarsha. That is what we sought the first Arya book, an anthology of Vedic women, to be. And it is this tone and tenor and the sensitivity and the sensibility that we will continue in future books also. Fundamentally, through this, what is it that we seek to achieve? We seek to relook at the colonial narratives. We seek to create new cultural conversations. These cultural conversations ought to happen both in the academics as well as in the society, and shape new thought around these things. This needs further elaboration, and I would like to emphasize a couple of points over here. We seek to address a lot of distortion. For instance, one thing that always pained me is the way the phrase Sati Savitri is used, especially in some parts of our country. When I grew up, that was one of the first stories that I read. And I always had the image of Savitri being a brave, learned, of a phenomenal aura of somebody who makes all her decisions by herself. She goes in search of her own husband, which is sanctioned by the family. In fact, minister recommends to the king, and then king says, we can't find you. You have to find it out all by yourselves. And she goes, she searches, she finds, and she chooses somebody much against the advice of everybody else. And finally, she even snatches him back from the iron clasp of none other than Yama. And after all this, how is it that a subdued, docile narrative around her has sustained, and all in the last 100 years? So this often disturbed me. And subsequently, I have seen this, that every single character, there is some sort of a distortion. An entire wrong play has been written around Madhavi, and so on and so forth. Criticism is fine. We must criticize our tradition, but we must criticize what is there in the tradition, not what is not there in the tradition. We can't be transforming it into a form that makes it convenient to criticize it. That is lack of integrity. And that has set in our times. It has been so normalized that it requires a significant emphasis to change it. At the same time, we need to present the way our civilization was formed, has shaped, has evolved. What are the cultural thoughts? What are our aesthetics? What are our sensitivities? What women thought as, high aesthetic and high sensitivity. This is extremely. Through this book, we also seek to present that. At the same time, it is to demonstrate the narrative possibilities contained within our accounts, which is an open invitation to all creative writers. You can jump into our traditional texts and unearth such pearls that you will be stunned, and you will not need some of the excess that you indulge in the modern world to create fantastic narratives. Shandilya Duhita is one such example. There are many such examples. We have made a humble beginning. Just in Mahabharata, we can pick, 250 women of great persona and present them. And if you just pick all the traditional texts, you will get maybe 1,000. And if you come into the first millennium and second millennium, the list is endless. It will be in thousands. So there is an opportunity space for creative writers to jump in and then come back with some beauty. It's our responsibility also to influence the next generation positively, truthfully. We should not become that generation that blocked access to the right accounts of the tradition. That risk we all run. It's our responsibility to ensure that the civilization flows its natural course to future generations. At the same time, beyond all this, there is a perspective of dharma in these accounts. There is dharmic thought, which is shaped by these women, and it is necessary for us to know that. There are civilizational ideals. These accounts also present fantastic societal frameworks that you otherwise cannot think. These are knowledge systems. These knowledge systems, just because they flow as a story, it doesn't mean that it does not have a sociological dimension. It is for modern intellectuals to look into those dimensions as well, which the distorting people have looked into for to create distortions. In which case people who stand for it must do the right thing. Finally, there is the fundamentals of Bharatiya Parampara, that is the Purushartha thought, Dharmartha Kama Moksha balance. All of these are beautifully presented in these stories. We must continue to strive for Satatya, that is the cultural flow, the natural course of flow of the civilization, where, in all change, we also seek this cultural continuity. It must flow like a river, the eternal flow of a river. That is how Sanatana Dharma is. We must leave an accessible legacy to our next generation. Already, we have severely damaged it in the last 100 years. At the same time, this must become an asset for teachers, mentors, elders in the family, so that they can present the right accounts to their next generation. Finally, more than anything else, we must create that curiosity in people to go to the scriptures and read them in the original, because none of this can become a substitute to reading things in the original. Every single author in this anthology is very deeply engaged with the traditional texts, and it's great fun, for heaven's sake. It's not as presented as an all the time serious job without no fun. It's great fun. Everything, it's dharmartha kama moksha. Every single dimension of life, if that is covered in these texts, then that will reflect in our experiences as well. So it is with this purpose, it is with this passion, and it is with this conviction that we wrote this book. So finally, to summarize, it is to present women who shaped Bharatavarsha. These women, they are the manifestation of the eternally present Shakti, and they're truly role models of our civilization. If you read the stories, it's very difficult to be not impressed and not influenced. They're in many phases. They've played very different roles. You'll see them in the accounts. No two women seems the same. So much for, individuality, in which the kind of individuality we strive for in the modern world. You get much better version in the traditional texts. They play different roles. They've carved a niche for themselves. They've charted their own path, but they have upheld dharma and they've embodied the tradition all the time. That is Arya. This book is there in front of you. It's available on all platforms. We look forward to our readers, going through them. We look forward to a lot of encouragement. We look forward to your feedback. We look forward to your criticism, and we look forward to a great engagement with the book. And more than anything else, we look forward to your engagement with Arya herself in the traditional texts. And that is the fundamental objective. With this, I kind of come to the end of what I sought to present as Arya. But I will go a step further and present to you something else that is happening in the Indic Academy as anthology series. This is the second anthology. The first anthology was Unsung Valor, curated by Sai Swarupa Iyer, which was Forgotten Warriors of Kurukshetra, in which I also had written a story on Ghatotkacha. We've also published another called Kranti Doot series by Manish Srivastavji. It is in Hindi. It is on freedom fighters, a lot of freedom fighters who are, especially the revolutionaries who are not known. Flight of Deities, just yesterday it was released, curated by Avtans Kumar. It is based on historical accounts present in the same book, Flight of Deities, by Dr. Meenakshi Jain. It's an anthology of desecration and devotion. Those historical accounts have been brought to life as short stories in this anthology. We have 3 more anthologies coming in English. Less Known Characters of Mahabharata by Aditi Banerjee, Kashmir Tales by Dimple Kaul, and then finally we have just announced one more series called the Srishti Sthiti Laya, Trimurtis, and Tridevis. There is one more anthology, and that is about the links with Cambodia, India and Cambodia, and the shared roots. and that is curated by Ratul Chakrabarti. So that is the 8th in this series. And Indica Today, where which is our platform for Shastra accounts and a lot of civilizational narratives. We are bringing two more series anthologies. One is on the spiritual heritage of Lokmanya Tilak by Dr. Yogini Deshpande. She's curating it. The other is synthetic spread of Indic traditions by Dr. Arvind Kaushik and myself. So we are doing this. Fundamentally, we are doing this. The reason why I'm presenting this is that this concept of anthologies with Indica head Harikiran Angaru brought in. So it is bringing a lot of writers and curators onto the platform to create many accounts, many focused accounts on various different civilizational concerns. This is a project through which we can together achieve many things. So I really invite all the aspirant authors, Indic enthusiasts to come forward and present their accounts in these anthologies. With this, I come to the end of my presentation. Thanks to Sangam Talks for this opportunity. And I bow to the scholars and the acharyas, gurus, purvacharyas, rishis, and the parampara. And finally, Saraswati, the Devata and the river, for this inspiration, which I pray that continuously flows so that we can do more and more of this. Dhanyavad.
Shiv Kumarji, that was a wonderful session. And your cover page, the Arya on the cover of the book, and her body language and her weapons say it all. They are self-explanatory.
Thank you.
I really liked it. And it was nice to know about all these stories. And would you like to tell a little bit about your curating journey of this anthology?
Absolutely. So we started in the month of October 2020. And then we called, for it, it took around 6 months to get all stories. We got more than 45 plus stories. Finally, choosing 10 was quite difficult. I mean, reading through 45 repeatedly 3-4 times and ensuring that we make the right selection itself was a Herculean task. Of course, some of those stories chose themselves, for some reason. Some of them were extremely well written. Some of them needed to be fleshed out still. Even though some had good possibilities, I decided that we'll keep it for the future because it will take a lot of time to flesh it out. Finally, my own favorite, Savitri, is still not there in this, probably in the future anthologies. And I think that inspiration will keep me pushing to do this more and more. But after that, the journey was very interesting. After we finally chose all the 10 and announced, I think it was in the month of April or 2021, we announced it. And then we came together. Then all of us read each other's stories. And I won't say, more than feedback, we shared our impressions and reflections that made it possible for the authors to relook at their narratives and re-architect them. And then we had a series of questions that we had prepared as to, is this covered? Is this covered? Is this happening? Is this not happening? Sometimes you ask questions and then answers emerge, all by themselves. And that was around 3-4 months. And then subsequently, we went through a very intense writing workshop anchored by a very senior Stanford prof. His name is Otis, and he's quite well known in Indic Academy. And he reviewed every story and from the standpoint of craftsmanship. And again, we all rewrote everything. Finally, multiple rounds of review. And of course, all of us know the challenges of the year 2020 and 21, navigating through all these challenges. And then finally, taking it to the rigorous editing process. We kind of did not hurry. And, then we sat through and figured out, in order to make it a book, what all is required, what other supportive accounts are required. So we prepared everything ahead of time and kept it. Ran it like a passionate, professional project. And of course, you mentioned about the cover. It's designed by Sindhu Kulkarni and Shrikantha. And that process itself was, around 2+ months of going through, what must be there, which line is, coming out correct, which line needs to be redrawn, and so on and so forth. Because the ethos and the, whatever is there in the book, that must come out on the cover as a visual and as an experience, and it must kind of interest people. So finally, all of that, and at 2.5 years later, the book came out. And in the process, we're all one family, and we're all energized to do a lot more. Thankfully, we have received a warm welcome from the Sanatana Sajjanas and the Indic enthusiasts. Young and the old alike are reading and encouraging us. Many people are telling that, they would like more accounts such as this. So the objective is to bring contemporary accounts. That is always the challenge, ensuring that there is continuity while there is change. That's what we are seeking to do. So this has been our journey. And in this process, many people have contributed, the entire Indica fraternity, Harikiran Garu, and, I've been, all the names that I've taken in my last slide, all of them I consult a lot of times. So it's because we are part of a fraternity and there is an ecosystem that, I firmly believe in the word satsanga. In the company of good people, many good things will happen. So you alone cannot do anything, and all of us need to remember that. And when that company is there, we're all able to do a lot more, much more easily. And, the journey is much more than fulfilling. I'm just thankful that, that we flowed this way.
And the other thing I would want to know from you is that, do you have, after reading all these stories and going through this much a lot, we know that there were lady rishis in Vedic times, but what about education for the normal women?
Very good point. See, in 11th century in Karnataka, there is a stone inscription. In this stone inscription, a lady is sitting on a chair and reading a manuscript in her left hand. By her right, on a small stool, a pile of manuscripts are lying. That is the picture, that is the image carved on the stone. And what is written beneath is even more interesting. It is written that her name is Saminirmidi, her parents' names are also given, and she is described as Sarvashastra Prasiddhe, meaning one who was famous for all Shastras. All may mean anything. It may mean 1 or 2 or 3, doesn't matter. But whatever the society thought of as all, she was versed in all. This is in 11th century. And this is an absolute, it's there in Bangalore Museum. This inscription is there. It's 11th century. Now, if you take a look at the Chalukya Rashtrakuta era of Karnataka, which I'm very well, I know that very well, you will find innumerable number of women. In fact, I've made a compilation on Twitter. I have some 45 to 50 women, which I've compiled, who are brave, learned, who took extraordinary decisions. All of them were common factor for all of them were learned. So definitely in the first millennium and second millennium until Kakatiya era, Vijayanagara era, you will find this reference. Madhura Vijaya in 14th century was written by Ganga Devi, who is, a lady, sister of one of the royalty. Similarly, if you go into ancient times, Aryabhata has Panini has special names for women teachers, for women, students. Now, if one or two here and there are studying or teaching, you can't have those terms. You will have a common noun only when there is sufficient number of such people. In a Kalidasa play, there are women, who are extremely learned. How would one may dismiss it as a mere play, but why is that even there in the imagination? In yet another book, a lady, goes off all alone to meet her classmate with whom she studied elsewhere. Why is that imagination also there? So you will find lots of references, and there is no doubt that women in Bharatavarsha had access to education. I mean, there can't be an inch of doubt. What can be doubted is, did all women have, all women of all communities did they have, so on and so forth. You can keep on problematizing it. But with emphatically and confidently, we can say that no other civilization can match the kind of access to education that Indian women had all the way until 1800. After that, it's downhill disaster, and that's another history. Even in the problematic era of 1200 to 1800, still our women had extraordinary access. A lady by name Shantala in Karnataka, Hoysala queen, is known for kind of art and knowledge. That kind of narratives you will have throughout. So I think on that count, India has done fantastically, and that story needs to be told. Absolutely needs to be told. There is a chapter on this by Sahana Singh in her book on revisiting the educational heritage of India. So one should read that. It's around 20 pages where she describes some of these elements.
Namaste, Shiv Kumar ji. Thank you so much for your good talk. I'm going to try and phrase my question in a way it makes sense. I'm trying to still figure it out. Sorry for that.
Sure.
I know that there would be lots of women across Bharatvarsh in those days who had studied the Shastras and various texts in Sanskrit. But given that they would have been located in different regions, and India was always well known for its diversity, they must have used that essence of the knowledge to communicate to people around them within that local cultural context. I'm sure they had that high sense of practicality of application. So would there be, I'm just assuming there would be a lot of women who would be doing that across different pockets of Bharatvarsh.
True.
And whether there would be at some time an opportunity for your group of people to, source the names of them, their stories, their contributions in sort of like an anthology for some future project, because I really appreciate what you all are doing. I don't want to sound like, oh gosh, you could do more. What I mean is you're doing such wonderful thing that it would be great for people like you to take on a project like this, even though you're busy at some stage in the future. But are you already aware of many such women who might be there who are writing in their local languages and tailoring it to the local context?
So I think, in local languages, what's happening, see, I know very well what's happening in the Kannada world. And I need to know, what's happening today in other languages. And I think we may not be able to step all by ourselves, but, definitely will co-opt. And this project, at least we are all looking at this project as a decade plus project, and a lot more people have to come on board to achieve this. It's impossible. This is for a few people to do this. I'll answer your question in two parts. One part, yes, absolutely. That is, you will find very good evidences of in the last 2000 years, even if you can't go into the BC era. And a lot of people are doing it. And we have to find that. For now, I would say our objective is to create short stories. Because, finally, the consumption of all this is higher in the larger society when it is in the creative form. And academically, some of these things have been done in the past. There is a book in 1953 published called The Great Women of India. In fact, I think it is some institution associated with Ramakrishna Mission who's done it. And they have published a fantastic book where, it's an academic book where chapter after chapter belongs to a particular era. And they have covered, who has done what and so on and so forth. It's not in great detail. Like, since it is a summary book, one book consisting of all women, it is, adequately summarized. But yes, we keep in mind what you are saying. For now, we are English focused, but there is a thought to write these things in our languages also. So there is also a reason why we picked English, because it is in the last few decades, it's in the English world that the greatest number of distortions have occurred. I'm deeply in touch with my mother tongue, and I can tell you that in our mother tongue, there are less distortions and more original accounts. So the possibility of all the efforts put to distortion in our Indian languages have resulted in almost nothing, actually. Whereas distortions in English and a few other languages have made disastrously negative impact. So that's why we chose it, and this is a first step. But we will keep this in mind, and thanks for that. I would also request, please do join, because this movement will continue. And in some of the future anthologies, we really look forward to new writers coming up and doing that.
Yes, Shiv Kumarji, yes, what I meant was like to draw stories from different areas, but write them in English. Because as you know, that these days people are very familiar with English, a big population speaks it, and make it accessible to them.
Absolutely.
More like in the sense of giving them a taste of different pockets of Bharatvarsh. And then they can go and explore, if it's their mother tongue, Telugu is the mother tongue, or Assamese, they can go and explore, oh, this is an Assamese lady, I'll go. But they get the taste from an English equivalent if you guys have contacts. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I would contribute whatever I could. I just have constraints in my circumstances, which make me feel awful for missing out on contributing. But thank you.
Absolutely. So we will do that, especially when we come to the first millennium, second millennium series. Then I think a lot of narratives that are not in the scriptural texts will get into that, folk and history and everything.
I'd like to conclude the session with one question myself, sir.
Please.
Actually, sir, I wanted to ask about the time when Ramcharitmanas was written. Ramcharitmanas concentrates itself on Ram, which is, of course, a very important character in Ramayana. But I think that was the beginning of when, there was a lot of room for distorters to make Sita look like this docile woman that she wasn't. So that's my first question, that how these books that you're writing, Arya, have a very similar reason like Ramcharitmanas, which is to reignite the fuel that is being lost because of invasions and different modes of colonialism now that we are faced with. So that's my first question. And my second question is, sir, how difficult is it to source notable women in the Northeast? Northeastern women characters, how difficult is it to find them? Because it's very difficult to find heroes themselves, being found in mainstream accounts. So how can we source them? And my third question would be, sir, since I am assuming you're Kannadiga, so would you like to tell us about Akka Mahadevi and Satyaka-ji, because those vachanas are something that I don't think mainstream Indian readers know about.
Yeah, who was the second person you mentioned? Akka Mahadevi and
Satyaka.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So I will answer the, I'll come in the reverse because the order of complexity is such. And thanks for asking those questions. Akka Mahadevi, at least, is somewhat well known in the literary circles of India. It was quite stunning for people to find Akka Mahadevi, and due to which, at least, the literary circles well known. Of course, in Karnataka, there is no kid who does not know Akka Mahadevi or Vasava or something like that. So I think when we come to 12th century, there will be one account of Akka Mahadevi. It's a fascinating account, the kind of engagement that she has with other Shivasharanas of her time. And she's one of those who's been extensively written in Kannada, and we will struggle to reduce that account into a short story. So we'll have to pick a very unique dimension, not sufficiently told, and that's how Satyaka, yeah. So there, I think we will have scope to elaborate a lot more, and that's why I said, in the Kannada accounts are so deep on women that we'll be able to write entire series, and that's why, for me growing up, it was difficult for me to accept that there can be a narrative of subdued women in India, because that's not my experience at all. Actually, I agree. So we will do that when we come to the 11th century, 12th century, 13th century, fascinating era, of times. The second question was about, sorry, can you repeat that second question?
The Northeastern women
Yes,
and
the
heroes.
So there the answer is what Aditi ji said, that you should go into the regional languages, Indian languages accounts, you will get it. Because we are not doing that, all this is happening, So it's what has happened in the last 75 years is a tremendous amount of lost opportunity. I don't want to get into too much criticism, but what mainstream narratives have done to our civilization is really unfortunate. They've just kept on, bringing narratives from everywhere except India, and due to which we've not had this. So it has to happen. So because it's worse is last 20 years, English has taken some prominence. Of course, it's ironical that I'm also speaking in English over here. So now we are living in this complex reality of having to bend English for our realities. But people who are doing that are not sufficiently in touch with their own languages. So there has to be a movement for all of us who are doing things in English to also be in touch with one Indian language mandatorily, so that we can bring those narratives and with a traditional sense. Otherwise, there are others who are doing it with totally other objectives. That is the second question. So the loss of Indian languages in the last 20 years from the elite education, that will have to be restored. We are struggling in the cities to bring up children with being in touch with one of our languages. So that crisis, if we don't solve, this is going to compound in the future. Now, the first question, I think that is the most important question. See, when our ancients wrote their books, each book is self-contained with a purpose. Obviously, all purposes, all sensitivities cannot be covered by all books. Let's take Kalidasa. Kalidasa, in his Abhignana Shakuntala, has portrayed Shakuntala a little, I would say, gentle. I won't say docile, but she's too sensitive and too gentle. Whereas Mahabharata Shakuntala is fierce and she is brave and she is fantastic. She inspires awe and respect in Mahabharata. It's the same Kalidasa in other plays has portrayed many other women very bravely, and there's no correlation between it. So it's not that it is Kalidasa's perspective universally or neither does it reflect anything in his era, because otherwise in the Gupta era, you will find fantastic women. In fact, in the Chandraketu Gar, one of the places in West Bengal where a lot of art has been found between 200 BC to 500 AD, the portrayal of women is absolutely brilliant. Somebody should make an anthology only on Chandraketu Gar, art representation, and as to what is the image of a woman in those times. And that's another thing. So the Gupta women were different. They were quite brave. So it's not that Kalidasa is reflecting that era. So whether it is Ramcharitmanas or whether it is any other account, each of those accounts is doing something. The flow of bhakti, of submission, of surrender to the divinity is what is, coming in Ramcharitmanas. So we will have to do two things. One, we will have to go into all those accounts and bring out those strong women's stories, which exist definitely, which we don't have to manufacture at all. At the same time, we have to showcase what's happening in a narrative that is, otherwise showcasing the same woman in a different light. So, but the civilizational text will still be Mahabharata of Vyasa, because it is that which is influencing and creating every other narrative. It is of that of Valmiki. You read Valmiki and then you'll have no doubt how tradition, thought of Sita. Sita asks a lot of very interesting questions, makes life, Rama says, it's so easy for me to convince everybody. It's very difficult for me to convince you. At one place, he tells Sita. She's brave in that. So we'll have to look at it in summary, and we will have to place everything in a particular context of that text. The Paramparas texts, Ramayana and Mahabharata of Vyasa and Valmiki, are at another level. They are covering civilizational, narratives, whereas many other narratives are bhakti narratives and so on and so forth. So while we reclaim these narratives, we also have to reclaim the positioning and the universes in which each text operates, and that's a very big journey. And that's a lot of work. And thanks for asking that question, because that is an extremely important question, more important than setting right a few accounts here and there.
Thank you for a very nice presentation, and I would also compliment you specifically on the topic that you've chosen. Not from a feminist point of view, but the female point of view of narrating these stories of women characters, because it is essential that homegrown, or let me say native female characters with a strong character is presented before the newer generations. My question specifically is with respect to the Panch Mahakanyas or the Panch Mahasatis. What my feeling was that the narration which you talk about is not so much out of malice that the Western, we imagine from the Western part, but their understanding of women has influenced a lot the way the characters are portrayed in English accounts. So would all the 5 characters of the Panch Mahakanyas or the Panch Mahasatis are also very powerful accounts. Whereas, for instance, as an example, let me take the example of Draupadi. What Draupadi, how she is portrayed in the Mahabharata, and then there has been recently a book written by, I forget now who, I think the Palace of Illusions or something like that. Now, there, the attempt is to show her in a new light, but fact remains, again, it is victim to that modernist, feminist portrayal rather than at bringing out her actual character, which was in fact very strong. She's supposed to be the motive of the entire drama. So do you also plan to do something, because it a very vital question that people are, I'm sorry, I'm taking time to frame the question. That when you talk of Sati, what exactly is the term when you talk about Sati? Sati is a woman of a high character. It does not, whereas it is often portrayed as something to do in a very, let me use a very low term, as to do with virginity or piety. So that is what is comes across when we see these 5 characters of Panchmahasati.
Absolutely.
Would you take these 5 characters also, because each one of them is a very powerful character, and they have a range of roles which it'll be very important to bring out, and why they are okay. Because as children also we used to recite that this thing
Yeah, you're right.
Pancha Devi
That's true.
Papanashanam and all that
True, true, true.
shlok we used
In
to.
fact, yeah,
So
Ahalya,
why they are
Sitara,
revered
Tara,
as the
Mandodari, Pudha.
Panchmahasatis? Yeah, yeah.
Yes, that's true. Panchakanyat Smarayan Nityam Mahapataka Nash. That
Mahapapa.
used to be the shloka. Thankfully, some people are doing it already. So, that's why we are trying to pick accounts that are not told. On Draupadi, Sai Swarupa Iyer has written a novel absolutely from Indic perspective. And that is one of the best-selling novels. It's an inspiration for all of us in this anthology. And she curated the first anthology of Unsung Whaler. We all wrote for her, and it's her inspiration flows in all of us here who are writing this anthology. So you are right about that, and there are people. There is a person who is already writing, a series on Panchamahakanyas, and I think if you see Koral Dasgupta, she's written 3 books, I think, already. Latest is Kunti. So there are people writing it. So I can promise that every account that is not written, that we will definitely get into that. I mean, through this, movement. I mean, others have to come and do. But yeah, definitely, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, if we have somebody like Tara as one of the Panchamahasatis, then we should be very proud of how we have shaped this civilization and thought, and that absolutely needs to be brought out. And it is happening. This will happen.